Kia ora, ngā mihi, Juliet. Gosh, it's a long time since I've been called cool for spending a Friday night doing something. So that's awesome. That's a very good start. Tēnā tātou, e te whānau, kua huhu mai ki konei I te āhuatanga o te pōnei. Mā I tēnei webinar I pāna ki ngā mahi o Plastic Free July. No mai hoki mai ki konei, ko Miriama Kamo tōku ingoa. Huria hau no taranaki whānui mai tahu hoki. Nā reire tiwi tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. So a very huge welcome to you on this rough evening, at least in Tāmaki it is, and on the eve of Plastic Free July. I want to begin by acknowledging those who are literally weathering the storms and the related fallout from extreme weather around the country, most particularly parts of Tāmaki and the region of Tairāwhiti, the East Coast. What's happening there, as we know, is horrific. It is heartbreaking as the region continues to struggle with lost homes, livelihoods, infrastructure, and of course, ongoing anxiety every time the rain falls. Ka tukua aroha atu ki a rātou katoa. And it's a fitting backdrop for this kōrero as we watch in real time the effects of climate change on us all. The good news is more people seem to be getting on board with what is needed. A One News Kantar public poll asked voters if the government should change its climate policy in response to recent significant weather events, and out of 1,002 respondents, 54% want the government to act with more urgency. And of course, from tomorrow, single-use plastic produce bags will be banned, along with plastic straws. Plastic produce labels, like what we see on fruit, will be phased out. This makes us the first country in the world to ban single-use plastic produce bags. It's going to take roughly 150 million produce bags out of circulation each year, and comes, of course, after New Zealand already banned all plastic supermarket bags in 2019. Now, it's all up for debate, of course, as to how much this helps and whether we're focusing in the right places. And this brings us, of course, to our panel. Now, while they might have comments to make in that regard, this panel is a news you can use type of fear. Plastic Free July starts tomorrow, as we know. So we want to know what we can do, how we can start, and why it's important from our esteemed guests. So I am thrilled to introduce you to Romain Mereau, the sustainability lead at ecostore. Romain is a trained director, actor and storyteller. We also have politician and environmentalist Eugenie Sage, and waste-free advocates, activists, environmentalists and educators, Kate Mead, otherwise known as Wasted with Kate, and Liam Prince of The Rubbish Trip. And what I'm going to do is ask for our panelists to please just tell us a little bit about themselves, a wee introduction, and perhaps if we could start with you, Romain.
Kia ora, Miriama, and hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Romain. I work for ecostore, who are one of the leading sustainability brands in the country. I worked for them for 12 years now, so been involved in lots of sides of the business, and my current role focuses on leading some of our sustainability initiatives, and a lot to do with our reporting of the business to help us kind of focus our efforts in the areas that matter most. So that is looking at things like packaging, plastic, and how we can, I guess, shape or find solutions to some of these big problems we're facing.
Thanks, Romain. Awesome. Lovely to see you. Eugenie, may we go to you?
E mihi ana ranganui rā ko papatuanuku, tēnā koroa, tēnā koe Miriama, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, kia ora. Lovely to be here. I guess I'm in the policy space too, working at Parliament as a Green MP to actually influence the framework that makes it easier for people to avoid waste and do better with plastics. Was Associate Minister for the Environment last term, and was really proud when New Zealanders really pushed hard and government was able to implement the ban on single-use plastic shopping bags, and then delighted that we're now going to a program to phase out more, but we have got so much more to do, and really working with communities and organisations and others to get the policy, get the law changed to set out that bigger framework.
Lovely. Oh my, lovely to see you. Thank you, Eugenie. And waste-free advocates, let's move to you now, and if we can start with Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Meads. I'm an educator in the waste space. I've just celebrating my 18th birthday, but we basically work for councils and community groups and organisations, businesses all over the country, educating on waste minimisation, trying to get people just on board with thinking about how they can do things differently, and big supporter of things like Plastic Free July and Liam and the work that's going on in this space, and Eugenie. It's been amazing seeing what the government's done, and we just want to be there to support people to understand the why and help them move to the next level to get more on board with understanding their responsibility as a consumer.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. And Liam.
Kia ora koutou katoa, and kia ora Miriama. It's awesome to be here with these wonderful people. I'm Liam. I'm zero waste advocate with lots of different hats that I wear. Got the rubbish trip under my name at the moment, but I'm also involved with Takeaway Throwaways, the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, the Zero Waste Network, and Kai Cycle, which is a composting initiative here in Te Whanganui, Aotearoa, Wellington. So yeah, I like to spread myself a little bit thin in the waste space, but it's awesome because there's so many cool people involved in the space, and yeah, it's a great community of people who really care about our communities and our environment, trying to make a better world. So that's why I do it. So yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora. Oh, lovely to see you, Liam. And those of you who may have seen some of my journey will probably also recognise that I've learned a lot from Liam and from Kate's in particular, just in terms of reducing waste. And Kate, I was even watching a video earlier today where you were talking about the different things that can and can't go into the recycling. And I was like, oh, I'm still learning. And some of the things that I think can go on the recycling, it's like, it'll say recycling on the cup, but no, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can. Like coffee cups. Who knew you can't recycle coffee cups? What's going on, Kate?
I'm just here to depress people.
I hope you can't hear my dogs barking out there, by the way. Hopefully that's Luna out there trying to get into this room, so hopefully she'll give up in a little bit. But look, tomorrow is, as we've said, it's Plastic Free July, and we want this to be a panel that's inspiring, that's uplifting for people where they don't feel frustrated or betwixt before they even begin in terms of those coffee cups, for examples. So let's talk about why Plastic Free July is a worthwhile thing to do, why it's important. Let's start with you, Kate.
Well, I think I love Plastic Free July, but the one thing that I don't like when it first started was that people would go hard out trying to just have no plastic for a whole month, like Dry July. And then on the 1st of August, they're like, oh, thank goodness that's over. And so I think that the best part about Plastic Free July is every year there's a whole month that's dedicated to people just having a raised awareness, because all of us in the education space, government, like with their legislation happening on the 1st of July, it all works in to 1 month where there's a lot of media, there's a lot of discussion, and there's a great representation of just helping people to understand that there are things they can do, whether they're small or big, or and I think also it encourages companies to be involved as well. We see challenges happening, all those sort of things, and it just it brings an awareness. And so I think it's a really important part of just us having an ongoing every year conversation about what's going to happen next.
Liam, when you first started on this journey, did you start with plastic?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was the first. I mean, it's kind of the obvious thing to start with if you're trying to reduce your environmental impact, reduce your waste. Yeah, so it was definitely the first thing. And yeah, I mean, we're surrounded by plastic, right? So it's kind of like, yeah, pick anything, like look anywhere and pick anything, and you can give it a go. So yeah.
Which is why Plastic Free July works so well then, because it's the obvious place to start. If you were going to be starting tomorrow, what's the first thing you would do?
I think it would be looking at, I mean, everyone who's involved in the waste space, waste audits are the first thing you do. You look at what's in your bin, actually have a look, pull it out, put it in your, put a tarp down on the lounge floor and tip it out and say, oh, what's in there? And, just pick the stuff that you see the most of. You might have, I don't know, lots of bags of lentils, or I don't know what it is, that you'll have something that's the most common thing, and start with that, because you know that's going to have the biggest impact. And yeah, and I mean, I mean, maybe you want to take that route, have the biggest impact, or maybe you want to take the path of what's the easiest change, what's the thing, you look at it and you say, yeah, I've seen an alternative for that and I can do that easily. So yeah, I reckon just have a look at what's in your bin.
I love that idea of a waste audit, and I'm imagining already my family being, gathered around this tarp and me tipping out the rubbish bin and them all being like, oh God. But actually I can imagine that just, having that visual aid is so potent, is so powerful in demonstrating the problem. And if you see, as you say, lots of one type of waste, then that's a really great place to start. Romain, what about you? What about your background? How did you get into this space?
I don't know. I guess I've always been interested in this stuff, just growing up, and which is how I ended up working at ecostore, because I always thought it was like, the thing about sustainability that was interesting to me. It's like you have to do the same thing as like a regular company or whatever, but you have to do it with more constraints, which to me is like being smarter about it, which is I always found that really interesting and appealing. And I guess it's the same with making like plastic-free swaps or whatever. It's like, how can I do the things? It's not about like stopping you from enjoying your life and being completely free of any worldly possessions, but it's like, what are things that you can do, and be a little bit smarter about it so that your overall footprint is a little more aligned with what kind of we think is the most responsible thing to do. So yeah, I think what you guys have already said as well about like how we're all learning as well, and I mean I include everyone here as well, like in that it's like we don't all have all the answers, but wherever you are in your journey, there's always an opportunity to learn a little something more, and maybe try like one or two things new. You don't have to do everything all at once, but if you start from like a place of like, hey, I don't know everything, I think that's always a good place to go from.
Yeah, I like that. Progress, not perfection. Hey, Eugenie, what if you have, so this is one of the problems that I have, is that I reckon if I lived alone, I'd be pretty close to zero waste. I'd like to think that. But I don't live alone. I live in a family, and they are all in different places on the journey, and nowhere near as close as I'd like them to be to where I'm at. But that's the reality. And if you are in a family, how do you manage the different journeys that you're on? And especially if somebody in your household is simply not even on that waka.
Really good question. I think a lot of people identify with that. I mean, it's talking with people and never, ever trying to shame them. It's, for me, I just remember my grandparents. They didn't have any plastics in the kitchen, really. And so we can live without plastic. But then if you're, and I know for me, shopping in a supermarket, so much of the food is wrapped in plastic. And so it's, how do you make those small choices that start the journey, but then how does government make it easy? So that's, I guess it's working with others in the petitions that Liam's been involved in to educate MPs, so that we have proper recycling labelling, so that people know that if they're buying this product, then it's only single use and it's going to go to landfill, can't be recycled. So it's conversations, it's doing the right thing, showing others, and it's engaging with tamariki, because they really care about the future and they can inspire others to make the change.
So how are those conversations going, Liam? Do you feel like the government's moving, or politicians generally are moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think there's been some really positive movements from the government in the last few years, and many thanks to Eugenie for I think really kickstarting a lot of those changes when Eugenie was the Associate Minister for the Environment. So but it's interesting because one of the things that with the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance I'm involved in, we've been really focused on the global plastics treaty that are being negotiated at the UN at the moment. It's really exciting because it's kind of like, it's like the Paris Agreement for plastic pollution, or hopefully even better than the Paris Agreement. But and and the New Zealand government has you know, a really quite ambitious position on what we need to do to you know, to end plastic pollution globally as a global effort. You know, we can't do it on our own, but how can we do it together? But I think one of the issues is that ambition at a global level is not quite matched up with what we're doing locally. And I think you know, trying to really raise up our policy, and you know, and there are things coming through the pipeline. There's new, you know, waste legislation that's being developed and stuff that could really help to take things even further. So, you know, I know there's work being done, but yeah, it's always, you know, there's more to do. There's always more to do.
Okay, where are we not moving fast enough?
Well, it's a tricky one, because I think there's a huge onus on brands at the moment from the perspective of really like unethically labeling their products, because we see in the consumer sort of sphere, when we're educating, people getting so frustrated with things like compostable, biodegradable, the triangle. Like, just because it has a triangle on it doesn't mean that you can put it in a recycling bin. But I think that the new standardization that the government's come out on the recycling is going to be a huge benefit for people and for councils and government to just understand that just because it's made of plastic and it has a triangle, it doesn't mean it can be recycled. But it still doesn't, like, recycling's still not the solution to the plastic problem. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, I have a recycling bin, it fits in there, it disappears like magic every week, so I'm doing a good job, you know. And I think there's a huge amount of work that the consumer needs to do to understand what can and can't go in there, but also, and the government's banning stuff, which makes it easy, but brands need to take a far bigger responsibility on making sure that they label their products correctly and ethically, because it's not fair for consumers to think they're doing the right thing because a brand can put I'm green or put a leaf or their colours on it. They're just brainwashing people, and it's not fair. And people get really angry and upset when they find that a brand's pulled the wool over their eyes. And I think that there's a lot more need for brands to take responsibility.
So, Romain, you've probably got something to say here. You know, that whole greenwashing space it can be a very confusing place for people, can't it?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think I definitely agree with what Kate's saying. What we hear a lot, and I think, you know, I always identify with this, is like, there's a lot of complexity in the information that's coming through to us. And even when people are trying to do the right thing, as Kate pointed out, they think this stuff is getting recycled if they put in the recycling bin, but it's not. And a lot of that has to do with, what are brands doing to make sure that they're being responsible for their products after they've sold them, and that they fit the waste streams that exist in the markets that they sell them in. One of the really cool, exciting, or just like beneficial pieces that we've been working on is we're part of this thing called the Australasian Packaging Covenant, which sounds like a weird sort of cult, but what it's about is really clearly labeling products so that their end of life is really obvious and not complicated. I'll give you a little example of that. So we just launched some toothpaste tablets recently, which are a sort of plastic-free way to brush your teeth, which is pretty cool and exciting. But you'll see on the back of the label that, I wish I had an example here, but on the back of the label, it'll say the cardboard is recyclable. And then we'll also have a little logo underneath which says bag needs to go on the landfill. What this is referring to is the little sachet that's inside, which is a moisture absorber. And so it's basically telling you, you need to separate that piece out, put it into the landfill, and then the other thing goes into recycle. And what these labeling tools allow us, oh, there we go. Thanks, Juliet. Yeah, so those are the icons allow you to really clearly identify what's in it. And it's a standardized system across all different products. So it's the intention is to make it a lot more simpler for people whatever products you're buying, to know what to do with that at the end of the life, and take some of that complexity out of it, so it's not confusing and so that you are able to do the right thing. It doesn't solve all the problems, but at least getting that clarity of information to people is like one of the first steps I think we should all be doing a lot more of.
Yeah, and that labeling needs to be really clear, doesn't it? You don't want to have to get a microscope out to see the writing on the back. In fact, in your video that I was looking at today, Kate, you were saying with this particular bottle, you need to take the sleeve off, and then you can recycle the bottle when the sleeve goes to landfill. And I'm not, I was sort of thinking, well, I don't know that that's that obvious on that bottle. And it'd be great if those labels really were obvious. Eugenie, what's your major frustration at the moment?
That's one of them, because there's been work underway on that for at least 3 or 4 years, and the Australians are much further ahead. My biggest frustration, though, is that the government delayed the container return scheme, because that was about getting people, getting a decent end of life, encouraging recycling and reprocessing of materials, and hopefully shifting people away from plastics. So that is a big frustration, because there's 2 billion beverage containers a year, and we really need to get on, implement that container return scheme, because it can be a model in terms of all the design that's gone into it for product stewardship schemes for others, other things like electronics, batteries, tyres has got some way down the track, but we really need that container return scheme. So that has been frustrating.
So it's on pause. You don't think it's on pause permanently?
They said defer. Prime Minister said defer. So I hope it's coming after the election.
I mean, it's a tricky old time, though, isn't it, with the cost of living crisis, and recycling plastic or worrying about waste is probably not high on lots of people's lists, even though I quoted that poll at the beginning, which was heartening. But how do we make this something that people can actually engage with and see the value of getting into this waste-free, plastic-free space? Let's put that to you, Liam.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? I was reading the Q&A.
So what I was saying was, we're in a really tricky time, cost of living crisis. Right now people want to get dinner on the table, and perhaps things like being waste-free or plastic-free isn't high on the agenda. So how do we make it a space that people can engage in easily? Yeah,
well, I think it's really important to acknowledge that everyone's in a different situation, and not everyone can do everything, and people shouldn't feel the pressure, just because there are trends and whatever to make changes, that people should feel that pressure. But I think there's a really important distinction to make between, often people think, oh yeah, I can't afford the eco alternatives because they're just that much more expensive than the regular stuff. But it's not always just about buying an alternative. Sometimes it's like doing something yourself, making something at home that can actually save you money, being more resourceful. And that's kind of the approach that me and my partner Hannah started when we started living without a rubbish bin, is how do we actually just make our own toothpaste and make our own toiletries and make our own snacks and stuff like that. And all of that has really just helped us so much. Like, that was actually one of the biggest surprises and positive spin-offs when we started, was like, whoa, we're saving lots of money doing this. So it can definitely be really positive in that sense too. So yeah, people shouldn't think that it's it's you have to go out and buy certain things or whatever. Going back to what what Eugenie said, our grandparents and how our ancestors used to live. We didn't have all these options, but we did just fine.
I remember when we did a story with you and Hannah saying, you can start this journey with a fancy jar, or you can just use an old jam jar. You can follow this journey however you like. It's not the preserve of the privileged. And I love that. But then the other thing that you talked about was, making your own snacks. And I really wish you hadn't, because every time Liam and Hannah have their waste-free rubbish trip, their seminars and so on, they make these beautiful little snacks. And it's all I can think about when you talk about them. The crackers, the little bliss balls, the different types of milk that you make. And I remember at the beginning of when I was getting into this space, I agree with you. There are so many exciting recipes and amazing switch outs that you can do so that you're not buying the stuff in the plastic, and it's fast and easy. So I reckon that my morning oats probably cost me, I don't know, 15 cents a bowl every morning, and that includes the oat milk, which I make in 30 seconds flat. So I agree. Yeah, there are ways of doing this that doesn't need to feel like you have to put a lot of money in it, or you need to go to the fancy refilleries or that sort of thing. Kate, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I 100% agree with Liam. I too love their snacks. Just putting it out there. Need to put some more recipes out there, Liam. But I think one of the things that also people don't realise is that and it's a discussion we've had just recently with a lot of people in our workshops. Often people use their recycling bin and things as a rubbish bin because they think that they're going to save money, or they don't think that it's their responsibility. And I actually just recently learned that a lot of the rates and things keep going up at the moment, and part of that is because when people keep putting waste into into their recycling bins, and it goes to councils, then we're actually paying as ratepayers a far higher fee to dispose of that recycling from the recycling facility, now that it's been sorted, than we actually would if we just put clean recycling into recycling bins. And I didn't quite realise how much that's costing us as consumers. And I was actually recently at the Tauranga one, and there was one truck came in, there was 10 bags of rubbish full of nappies, dog poo, you name it, it was there. And now everything surrounding that was getting picked up, put into a landfill bin, and then that comes back to us as a cost on us as consumers. And I think that people think it's not their fault, it's not their responsibility. And I think this is a worldwide problem when it comes to plastic overall, that we just, we're constantly going, and with our TikToks, Miriama, we've got heaps of people who have been like, it's not my fault that the brands make it, and then they should pay somebody to wash it, and they should pay somebody to do this. It we don't like to take responsibility ourselves, and that's why we started that series in the supermarket, to try and encourage people to actually stop and think before you buy. And I think with what Liam was saying about whether it's a jar, whether it's changing the way that you make your own washing products, doesn't have to be expensive. And sometimes people say to me, no, but the more expensive stuff is ethically packaged. But in actual fact, when we went in and we had a look, Pam's and a lot of the home brands are packaged in recyclable plastics, and the more expensive ones aren't.
Huh.
So I think there's a whole lot that goes on. I think there's a lot of assumption and myths. And one of the big myths, as Liam said, is that being sustainable is expensive. But it's not about going and buying a new wooden brush and throwing out your old plastic ones so now you look sustainable. It's about using things till they're dead and then replacing them with something more ethical.
I remember also that you reminded me when I did my story on Sunday with Hannah and Liam, and I said to Hannah, I've got this roll of Glad wrap. What shall I do with it? And she said, well, just don't, obviously just don't use it. Because I was like, should I use it up? And she was like, no, just don't use it. Put it away. It's much better. It's safe in your drawer, at the bottom of a drawer, than it is being used up and going into the environment. So that roll has been sitting for all these years in the back of the cupboard, and every now and again somebody tries to sneak it out and it's like, no, oh my god, you can't. But Eugenie, I wanted to ask you about why this. So for me, this journey was surprisingly joyful. I thought, and I think it might have been Kate or Liam that mentioned that you can start this journey thinking, well, I'm going to be taking stuff away. I'm going to be sacrificing. And what I found was that I was just adding stuff in. And the biggest surprise to me was that it brought me joy in my life. Now, I know that as a politician, you aren't going to be feeling joy all the time on this journey. You'll be feeling a lot of frustration. But is there, what is it that keeps you in this game?
Going back to your other question about costs, what is cheap and convenient for humans often puts a cost on nature. So that's how I got into this journey. And when you think about the albatross on the Gisborne beach, which had swallowed a plastic bottle, that's why we need the system change at the bigger level. And what's really brought me joy is after we banned single-use plastic bags, when you go on beach cleanups now, you don't get them. And so it is reducing the plastic waste that goes into the oceans that turtles, fish, seabirds end up swallowing. So that brings joy because that is actually making a difference. But what brings me joy too is the system change that we need to get to make it easy for people, because individuals can do so much. But Kate's point about the problems with recycling, it's one of the reasons why councils want a container return scheme, because at the moment the costs of dealing with all those containers falls on the community through rates. A container return scheme means that the manufacturers, the beverage owners and the retailers contribute to dealing with the beverage containers and reprocessing them. So you can be joyful when we get the system change that makes it easier for people to do the right thing.
Yeah, so it's a cost to the planet, and it's also a cost to our pocket if we don't get this right. And I think that's a really important point, that we don't necessarily recognize that actually we are paying for this. We are paying for this. Roma, what about you? You know, being on this journey and Plastic Free July starting tomorrow, what is it about this journey that has kept you on track?
Well, I don't know. I think there's like joy to be found in some of those little things that you kind of like just build into your day. I've got my little prop here. So this is my little razor, which I bought like when I was like 19. And I haven't used another razor since then. So it's like, you know, over 10 years. And I just, you know, like, it's really satisfying to me that I can keep using something, and I don't know, it just makes me feel a little bit kind of happy. Those kinds of things are really helpful when you're dealing with these problems that are so big they can feel overwhelming. So sometimes I think it's just focusing on some of those small things that are encouraging. And yeah, like the little keep cups as well, you know, like the coffee cups as well. And I've got this lunch bag, which I also bought like, I don't know, early when I started working at ecostore, and I still use it. And it's made out of this canvas material, and like, I don't know, it just beats having a plastic lunchbox. So I don't know. It's that kind of stuff that it's nice. I don't know, like, and then you bring it with you, and you've got a kind of story to tell with it as well. As opposed to these objects that you kind of use and dispose of, and they're all kind of anonymous, you know. So I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do too. A sense of meaning and mindfulness about it, and it's kind of, it almost feels sometimes like a meditation on life when you are, you know, when you are sort of narrowing down what's of value and what brings you a sense of purpose and satisfaction. Liam, your thoughts? Why are you still fighting this corner?
It's because well, I just can't see another way of living, to be honest. I mean, I talked about the cost savings and stuff being a real surprise, positive spin-off, but there was just so many, like, just starting on this journey, and as you said, Miriama, like, there's just this real sense of connection to things, and just, you know, connecting with people and communities and learning skills that, you know, have been passed on from generation to generation. Like, there's just something like really magical about all of that. It's kind of like, once it clicks, it's just, I don't know, I've ever since that I had that click moment, it's like, there's just no way I'd go back, you know. It's like, it's just a better way of living, you know. And yeah. let's just try and get more people on board. So yeah, and I think I just wanted to say too, like, trying to like link up the systemic stuff that Eugenie was saying, and some of the other kind of, you know, really practical individual stuff we've been talking about, is, you know, it's really important to remember that, you know, those decision makers are people too, and they live their lives, and they go shopping, and, you know, we all do all these things. And so the more we can normalize those little changes, those little lifestyle you know, connections and changes, is the more we're actually demonstrating what's possible to ourselves and to others around us. You know, and because again, it's kind of like what we can do at the systemic level is actually making it easy for us as individuals to make those choices and changes. So yeah, and just carry on and realize those positive benefits from doing it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned connection, because yeah, you once you're on this waka, there is absolutely that potent sense of connection to people and planet. Kate, what about you?
I suppose I got into this because I started using cloth nappies years ago, and that was my light bulb moment. And then as I learned more, I got hungry for more, and I've learned more and more. And I just like meeting people like Liam and Hannah, and just learning from them and learning from Nick Turner and all these different people. I'm like a sponge, and I just want to know everything. But then what I love is sharing what I've learned with other people. And I've always claimed I'm not perfect. You know, I do my best every single day to make better choices, but we travel a lot and there's things that we can't change. And so for me, like, there's things that I are out of my control, but then when I'm in front of a group of people and I see their light bulb moment, when you're talking about greenwashing or compostable or whatever, and you see the light go on in them, that gives me a buzz to keep going, because I just want more and more people to know. Like, I think often we live with our heads in the sand, and then we don't raise out of it to actually see what's actually going on around the world. And when you start having those open conversations and you learn from people, you can't help but be impacted by that. So then I'm a storyteller, and I like to tell stories, and I like those stories to impact people and make them just think about what they can do. And we always talk about just the one small thing. You know, you don't have to do everything, but if 5 million people tomorrow on the 1st of July in New Zealand just use one less piece of plastic, 5 million pieces of plastic don't get used in one day. We can make huge change. We've just got to get on board and just do the small things, and it will have a huge impact.
Yeah, that's such a powerful thing to say. And the other thing I think that is worth mentioning too is that for me, when I started on this journey, before I began, or just it was the transition really of having deep eco anxiety and thinking, oh my God, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. And then when I started on this journey, it kind of miraculously lifted. That doesn't mean that I don't still have anxiety. I have deep concern about what's going on, but I don't feel crippled by it in the slightest. I feel hopeful and optimistic and motivated and energized. And that's what this journey can do, and that's what you guys, all 4 of you, enable people to connect to, that sense of being able to mobilize and make a difference. It's 12 past, and so I think it's time that we go to some questions, if we have any, from our audience. Juliet's going to come back on, and she will facilitate those questions for us. Thanks, Juliet.
Hi guys. Yeah, we've got some really awesome questions. I'm going to try and pass over to the question askers, questionnaires themselves, so that they can ask them. So the first one, I'm just trying to find Claire. So this is when we see how good my technology skills are. They were all in alphabetical order before, and now they're not. Actually, I think Claire's just gone. Okay, so I will ask Claire's question for her. I know it's one that some of our panelists, or probably all of our panelists, are going to feel pretty strongly about. Is compostable packaging the answer, or is it a red herring? I think we'll have some good answers on that. Who wants to start? Liam, shall I?
Sure. Yeah, you know, I've got lots to say about well, as I guess important to kind of to just say that one of my jobs is I'm a compost manager at KaiCycle here in Wellington, and so I'm seeing what's happening when we put stuff in a compost and what it's being used for, to grow food, and there's all these soil organisms that live in the soil that provide us with the food and the nutrients that we need. And so I'm really careful about what I've become much more conscious and careful about what we are putting in the soil, because that's what feeds us, you know, it's that relationship. And so I think we have to be so careful with packaging, putting packaging, often compostable packaging is just treating the soil as like a waste disposal. You know, it's a dump really for packaging, which you know, it's just such a minefield around the different types of we just don't have proper regulation of the packaging in New Zealand, so we don't know really what's in the different products. And yeah, so it's I mean, there's just so many things, all the chemical additives that might be in the products that, you know, that could be harming us even before we put it, you know, in a compost or not. You know, half the stuff doesn't even end up in a compost. It probably just goes to landfill and then it's just releasing greenhouse gases. And it's single use as well. You know, it's still requiring resources to, even if it's made from corn, you know, to grow the corn, to manufacture that and process that into a packaging product. So there's just so many red flags, I guess, with it that but for me it's kind of like, yeah, when I'm really facing the compost and the soil, that's the big reason for me to kind of just yeah, say no. I don't think it's the answer.
Yeah, that's really interesting, seeing it from, looking at the soil itself and what we're putting into our soil. Does anyone else on the panel want to add anything to that?
I'll add to that just that I find it incredibly frustrating, the amount of brands who are starting to use that term compostable. And I love that the government, I think it was it late last year or early this year, came out with a statement on the compostable products, because there's not enough regulation, there's not enough rules, and it just seems that people just stamp "I'm compostable" willy-nilly on their products just because somewhere in the world they composted them one day. And that's one of the greenwashing things that I just really it makes me so angry, because I just see all of this stuff and I feel for people who in cafes who are buying compostable coffee cups that are told that this is better, but then if they end up in landfill, they're actually oftentimes worse than a non-compostable cup. So it's just such a greenwash, and there's just not enough information. And you start, you know, go deeper into the plastics like Liam's talking about, and you really should only be putting things that you would be prepared to eat in a compost bin. And if you're not prepared to eat the chips and eat the bag at the end, then you shouldn't be composting it.
That's a really nice way to put it. I think on that note, we'll move on to the next question. I know other people have probably got things to add, but I can see more and more questions coming up. So Maria Lamb, I'm going to unmute you so that you can ask your question, a really cool question about how to engage with people. That's cute. You might just need to, so I've allowed you to, oh, there we go, yep. Do you want to have a go, Maria? You seem to be off mute. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. So I will ask her question, sorry about that. Okay, so the main part of her question was, she's in the waste sector, but she feels that she has to tread very carefully in conversation, or she could potentially bore people. She'd like to know a little bit more about greenwashing and how to educate people about it. And I guess just how to engage with people in these conversations, people who aren't already really keen, like everyone who's here tonight. Eugenie, would you like to have a crack at that one?
I don't think you do bore people. I've been to meetings and you start talking about something like coffee cups and you've got a whole lot of business people that are interested in talking about coffee cups and what happens to them. People, because it's not big and complex, they are actually interested in individual products. So it's, what are the values that we share? Nobody wants an unhealthy environment, nature coming off second best. So it's explaining the connections with our own health and well-being based on a healthy planet, and just some of the things that we were talking about earlier, the sense of connection you get with people and planet by making these changes and starting, I think, at that individual scale of what individuals can do and some of the things that they use day to day. So and how do we achieve that change? And I think Miriama's point, just in terms of how do we create a basis of hope, change is possible, and it's starting on this journey that means we're working with others to achieve that change. Yeah,
absolutely. Hey, panelists, I was thinking if you've got something to add when someone's answering a question, you can raise your hand and then I'll know to come to you afterwards. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. Off you go, Liam.
Yeah, just super quick on that point. I think, you know, when people hear people start talking about this stuff, they'll resonate with people they identify with. So, you know, look at me, I've got dreadlocks, you know, I'm probably gonna only resonate with a certain group of people, but you know, you get people who are farmers, you get people who are business people, you know, whatever, you resonate with different audiences. So I think that's a really important part of, you know, getting past whatever judgments, you know, and we all make, you know, unconscious judgments. So yeah, just getting more representatives of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to try one more time to see if I can get someone asking their own questions. So I'm going to Emily Holdaway. Some of you may know her as officially M. So if you unmute yourself, M, and see if we can hear you.
Hi, does that work?
Yes, it is. Go for it.
Kia ora, everyone. You're very lucky. The kids are asleep. I was kind of panicked that you'd choose me. Hi, everyone. I've loved listening to you tonight. Oh, God, what did I write?
About the responsibility of brands. How much should be down to us?
My question is, you've got personal responsibility, you've got business responsibility, and you've got government responsibility, right? And sometimes, especially because I'm talking to a lot of mums who already have so much weight on their shoulders, and there's so much targeted marketing at mums to save the planet as soon as they have a baby by swatching out their nappies and menstrual products and everything I'm talking about tomorrow. But then on another hand, you've got Zuru Toys pumping out 1 billion pieces of crappy plastic that are going to end up in landfill. You've got Temu, who's making a handbag for $2 and people are lapping it up and sharing it all over social media. When can we look at them and say no? Like that, where does that responsibility to these huge polluters step in? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So Roma, maybe we could start with you as representing a brand not like the ones that Em is describing. What are your thoughts on what she's asking?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us feel, and it strikes me that a lot of that comes back to actually what Eugenie was saying before about our children. And I think if more of this stuff becomes a part of the education conversation, then we are hopefully raising kids who will be more thoughtful about what they do choose to buy. We can't, at the moment, you know, there is some good regulation coming in to prevent the less responsible, you know, branding or customer companies springing up. But a lot of those people are just trying to make money, and so unfortunately that comes at a different cost. But I do believe that most people who do buy those kinds of things would not be happy about it if they knew the total cost of it, right? So again, it comes down to education and access to information, and in a way that is going to be easy for people to recognize that as well. The hard thing about sustainability sometimes is that it's really complex because all these things are interconnected. A conversation about packaging can often lead to a conversation about ocean pollution or into climate. And all these things are really, again, have a lot of complexity to them, or supply chains and human rights. So I think being able to bring all that complexity into a way that's easily digestible and like useful to people is still one of the biggest challenges we're all trying to deal with. but yeah, I think honestly, like I would just love more education to be available to people so that we can all get a little bit better at this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Remember to just raise your hand, guys, if you've got something you want to add, because there are so many great questions that I really want to get to. We're not going to get through them all, but I'll go to this next one, which is anonymous, but I think it's a really interesting one. How do we get more men to care about waste? Although this isn't backed by research, anecdotally, it seems like a lot of the care and burden of waste minimalisation falls to the women. Yes, go for it, Kate. Awesome.
It's funny because my partner and I, like when I first met him, his way of doing his waste was a black sack, and and everything went in the black sack and hidden out the back of the shed before I turned up because he knew what I did. And so it's been like a 4-year education plan that I've had going with my partner. And I actually found that, yes, it still falls to me a lot, but what I did was introduce one small change each time. Like we just started out with food scraps bin, then we just went to, oh, can you just put your bottles here, babe? And then, oh, can we now that we've got the bottles there, can we take them out to there? Now, and I just have changed one thing. And then he actually said recently to one of his clients, he's like, I don't know how I became so sustainable. And it was like without him even knowing, it's just happened. But I think one of the biggest impact was actually just recently, I took him to the recycling plant in Tauranga when we were doing some filming, and it wasn't a finally moment, but his eyes were wide open when he saw what they were actually having to deal with, because he's heard Joe say that all the recycling's going to landfill. He's heard his mate say that, I've driven a truck and nothing happens to it. Like, he's heard all of these rumors. But it wasn't until he saw with his own eyes that he could understand why there's a problem. And for him, then he went and told every single person he could find about what he'd seen and why it was a problem. And I think that sometimes it's different for everybody, but especially when us as women can be quite naggy, and it becomes like, oh, why are you always telling me to do this? Whereas if you can show them the why, or you implement it in simple stages, it's a real easy way to just change your behaviour.
Yeah, I love that answer. And it is really cool to see a number of males here tonight as attendees, and of course also in our panel. So, I've often felt that way about the female-male balance, but I feel like it might be starting to change. So yeah, hopefully. I think we've got time for one more question. I'm so sorry to there's such fantastic, all of them are such great questions. I'm going to go to Cherie. I'm going to try and bring you in, Cherie. You can always refuse if you don't want to be part of it, but if you do, just unmute yourself. Yep, I can see you're doing that. And do you want to ask your question about longer life plastics?
Yeah, I was just wondering how the panel felt about longer life plastics that obviously can't be recycled, but I'm thinking more like children's plates, obviously, because children need, well, don't need, but they do better with plastic, let's say, sometimes.
Unbreakable things.
Unbreakable things. Yeah, and obviously there is glassware that we can use in place of Tupperware, but obviously that's a common option for us as well and can be reused later on as other things. But I was wondering how the panel felt about longer life plastics.
Is there anyone who wants to kick this one off?
I have some thoughts about this. I don't think plastic is inherently bad, but I think our relationship with plastic is problematic, right? So I think that's important to consider. A lot of the problems that we have with plastic are to do with single-use items and the way we use them in abundance when we don't really have to. But it's because it's been, considered economically affordable or cheap. And so we've done that for, the last 80 years or whatever. So I think that's something that I would like us to consider. And then the other thing kind of attached to that is being kind to yourself. I think this is really important. So we're all on this journey, and I think one of the problems with this kind of, one of the challenges with this is like feeling guilty about all these things. And I think it's always remembered, like, it's important to remember, like, just to be kind to yourself, that even if you're doing a lot of positive things, sometimes there's things that you can't action, or you forget, like you forget your coffee cup, you forget your bag or whatever, and you have to use a plastic thing, and like, it's okay. Like, it's, you don't have to feel guilty about that. Being kind to yourself is also being kind to other people who are on that journey, because as was said, like, no one likes being told what to do, and especially no one likes being told what to do in like a negative way. So yeah, I think those are things to consider just like around that question, but I want to open that up to the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I think you've answered that so beautifully. Eugenie, what would you like to add?
Well, I've got there's a plastic picnic set that's about 40 years old. So I think it's like Roma's razor. If you are going to buy things that will last, it's a single-use plastics that are particularly problematic. So it's things that have a purpose and a story. And yeah, I agree with Roma.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cherie. That was a really cool question. Okay, well, that's really all we have got time for tonight. I would just like to finish off by saying thank you again for everyone who has come here tonight. A special thank you to our panelists. I loved how much of the talk tonight revolved around joy, because I think so much of the, people fear plastic free. They find it overwhelming or intimidating. They think they have to get rid of every piece of plastic in their lives and it's too much, so they just don't bother starting. So I think the positive vibe tonight has been really, really inspiring. I've been jotting down notes really quickly because there have been some things that each of the panelists have said that I'm really going to take away from tonight. So Liam, when you said it's just a better way of living, like, why would I go back? I loved that. Eugenie, when you talked about the beach cleans and how now after the plastic bag ban, you're not finding plastic bags anymore, that really hit a note with me. Kate, when you talked about how if 5 million people tomorrow all gave up one piece of single-use plastic from their life, what a difference that would make. And Roma, I loved what you said, that plastic isn't inherently bad, it's our relationship with plastics. That was just one example of many of the wonderful things that were said tonight and that I'm going to take away. I'd also just like to take a final moment to say a really special thank you to Miriama. I was thinking that I was going to host tonight when I came up with this idea, and Miriama said, "Oh, I can host it if you like." Oh my gosh, I'm so glad it was you and not me. You are so good at this. You have done such an amazing job, and you are such a huge advocate for zero waste and sustainability. And you use your public profile for good. And those of us who work in this space are so grateful to you for that. The way you are so generous with your time. I'm actually yet to ask Miriama to do something like this and for her to say no. I don't know how far I can push it. She yes. She's amazing. You're a very special person, and thank you so much for being our host tonight.
Thank you. Brings me joy.
Yeah.
Let's finish on that note. We'll finish with joy. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll end the meeting now. Have a good night.
Great week
and a great July.